That's no problem. I got that lined up.
Okay, well, 7 or 8 would be
I've
better.
got about 8 or 9 that I can figure right off the bat. That would
Yeah.
probably get at least most
Well,
of them.
for your own good, no more than 9 would be good.
Okay.
Because pulse diagnosis, a smallish group is good.
Right,
So
shoot
some of you
for
guys
8.
who are interested, pay attention because she didn't live that far away from here.
We're having one on next Sunday, I think.
On what?
A small group get together.
Okay. Yeah.
To study pulse diagnosis?
Huh?
Oh,
Yeah, we can include that.
Yeah.
We do it occasionally.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Well, now that I know how to
At
get a hold of
Tracy-
you.
Excuse me, at Tracy's house.
to study,
You know Tracy?
Yeah, I don't know where she is though.
Okay.
to do pulse diagnosis, I would do, that I would travel a bit, not to, New York State or something, but just around Minnesota, Wisconsin to teach a pulse diagnosis, 5 to 9 people. That's true in the Twin Cities. I'll probably get together with Cynthia Thomas to do that. But because it's best to have a small class, and it's not, and therefore you can't go to like California and teach 5 people and come back and do anything but cover your costs. And so, and it's hard to teach. It's kind of tedious for a class like this. It's not as good a subject to.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we ended up doing tongue diagnosis a little bit more, and which is easier to learn. The pulse diagnosis is so exact, really fascinating, because it often gives you the exact remedy you just look up. And you get insights in just a second, it just sums up everything that's going on. And it teaches you, the organism.
What's the best way to get a hold of you, Matt?
Oh, so my email is greenmedic@copper.net. So it's greenmedic, MEDIC. And I probably wouldn't go to Illinois to do a class like that.
You can come up and visit us.
I'll come from Illinois to
Yeah.
your class. Okay.
Yeah.
What?
You should get on mailing lists for, and the Madison people too.
Copper.net.
Yeah, I will also, they do want to get me up in Duluth, but you guys don't need to, Jude can do it in Duluth, but I'll be, if we arrange it in the Twin Cities, I'll teach there, Cynthia, and I want to do some of that. I took kind of a sabbatical this year from teaching in Minnesota. I only taught in Duluth, which is almost like another state. In Wisconsin. And even then I didn't teach at my house. I only taught, a field. So, let's see. Okay, so I was asking whether they wanted to learn more about energetics or about single herbs or both. Because we can't talk about energetics without talking about the herbs, but perhaps the last outstanding herb that both of us kind of maybe want to talk about for sure is the yarrow.
Wonderful.
So we can talk about that. And actually, that's the funny thing about herbalism is that you get about, half a dozen to a dozen simples that you just use and use and use. It's very typical. I think that's even typical of the people that use a lot of formulation. Simple means single remedies. You're good at using them single, you're good at using them in formulas. And they're just utilitarian. And what do you think of, like yarrow, blue vervain, most of the ones, yellow dock would be another one we haven't talked about. Do you use yellow dock? Oh, yeah, we could talk about yellow dock. Burdock. These are ones, like, she doesn't have good burdock, but boy, can't live without it. And, on and on, kind of like that. Good, real basic work. Oh, elder, I would say. So, things like that.
And some.
What? Sumac? Yeah, I would say that too.
Yes.
Yeah, because,
Use a lot of that.
yeah. Oh, sumac is one we should talk about too. Yeah, okay, because sumac, you and I use a little differently. Well, let's start on sumac, and you can.
I'll start on Yarrow.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Well, I'll start on Yarrow. I think I can use that longer because. Yeah, because you don't have a lot of it there. So. Isn't that amazing? Again, one would think. I've been in a few places where there wasn't a lot, yarrow. Did you plant it? Does it grow once you
I
plant it?
planted it, it's only like this tall.
Does it flourish?
It flourishes.
There, yeah, there's two different.
A big patch
Yeah.
this tall.
Yeah, because yarrow,
Hot.
Yarrow's a plant that likes stress, I think. It likes to grow.
I think I've got too much sun on it, I think I need to get the shade.
Yeah, that could be.
Mine's growing right next to my kid's
Yeah.
swing set.
Yeah.
Hey, that's
It
a
just,
sign.
yeah, it just showed up all of a sudden.
That's a
I've been
sign.
there for 10 years, and no herbs have ever grown there.
It's
Yes.
protecting them.
Yes.
It's a sign, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Karen and Sarah have it growing up in the high desert out in California, and it does okay with the heat there.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
here's
I see
prairie
it.
pine. You know, it does grow out in the prairies. It doesn't grow in shade.
Yeah.
Mine's in
Yeah,
the shade.
it's
It's half
different
shade.
kind of heat and
Half
stuff.
shade.
I suppose you got the humid heat.
Yeah, it's very humid. Yeah.
You know, interesting that you say that's growing there by your child's swing or your kid's swing set. I have one of my granddaughters when she was 2 years old. She fell out of a bedroom window. They were up on the second story, and they were. She was shaking out her blanket, airing out her blanket, and the blanket went. And she's looking out the window, and there she went. And there was yarrow growing below my window. And so I went and I got that yarrow. When I got the call that she had fallen out of the window, I grabbed my yarrow and I went over there to her house. I beat the ambulance there. And I put yarrow in her mouth. You know, I just crushed it up a little bit and put some in her mouth. And then the ambulance attendant, the EMT, was like, "What's in her mouth? She's throwing up." I'm like, "No, that's yarrow. Leave it there." You know. And, yeah, and she broke 3 vertebrae, but she's 6 years old now. You wouldn't even think she even had an injury. It's pretty amazing. And it was growing below my window.
Yeah. Burdock, all of a sudden burdock grew, not burdock,
Yeah.
yellow dock just showed up in my garden last year. Now this year I have yarrow, just out of nowhere.
They come to you.
Well,
And
let's
my-
see why you should have yarrow. And yarrow is a protector against injuries and stuff like that. Or it's good to have around if there is an injury. Very good. Let's see. So it's ancient reputation. In fact, one of the most ancient herbs because it's called Achillea, named for Achilles. And it said that Chiron the centaur taught Achilles and Jason and Hercules the use of this as a woundwort. And Homer has an account that's, really old, ancient literature. Homer has an account of the use of it. The warriors shot with an arrow in the thigh, and they pull it out, and they wash off the wound with water, clean water, and then they sprinkle the root of that anodyne, which Chiron the centaur taught Achilles. Chiron was the father of arts and sciences, quote unquote. He's actually kind of a shaman because he's half human, half animal. It has very ancient lineage that way, and the American Indians used it as a wound remedy too. The Lakota name, I can't remember it, but it's Paiute or something, medicine for the wounded. So, woundwort. Another name for it is carpenter's weed because they say it looks like the saw, the teeth of the saw. I can think of a lot of other leaves that look more like a teeth of the saw, but at any rate, that's because it's good for carpenters. So, soldier's woundwort, carpenter's weed. It's good. There's 2 interlocking uses that are quite important. One is wounds, or number 1, cuts, and also blood blisters and bruises, black and blue marks. But particularly ones more associated with violence, like where you're bleeding and you have a bruise. Whereas arnica, the famous remedy, is more just when you have a bruise without bleeding, and you should never put arnica on an open cut. Yeah, contraindicated. Okay, and so yarrow has this violent quality to the injury somewhat, and then use number 2, it's for fevers, colds, flus, etc. And so also a violent, like being struck by a cold wind or something like that, or heat wave or whatnot. It grows in hot and cold places both, or like deserts you were saying, like hot, cold at night. I've seen it on the north shore of Lake Superior, like on those south-facing hills, like facing, that's cold and hot and cold, And even in the wintertime you can kick the snow off and you'll find it, So use number 2, it's good for fevers, etc. So those interlock, and we see the signature, which is really worthwhile here. So the leaf is all like little vessels, the veins. The canopy has been cut back to the vessels, so to speak. So that whole, they call it millifolium, million thousand leaf, but actually that means, that they didn't know about evolution. So it means that through evolution they got cut back, the canopy is gone, and it's just the arteries. So that's like, it's very adaptable at the periphery. It can send blood or take blood away. It has control over the capillaries and the circulation like no other plant almost. So I call it the master of the blood. It has many ways of ruling the blood. And it has a real strong neurovascular power, so it can open or close vessels. One woman used it. My favorite remedy for Raynaud syndrome, when you get like two fingers that are really white, is safflower oil. Real simple, just cooking oil, put it on there. That's a cousin. That's also a bruise remedy. Good medium. That's a good oil to use for bruise remedy, to put yarrow in or something you're going to treat bruises with. But at any rate, one woman, that didn't work for her. She had like Raynaud's of the whole leg because she had not a very bad injury, but it turned bad, and the leg would go pale, then it would go purple, and it was atrophying even. And so she was listening to one of my lectures, said, "Oh, yarrow, I need yarrow," and that did cure it. So, and I can't remember, I would have had her do sitz baths, I'm sure, but I'm not sure whether she put it on externally or internally or a sitz bath. But at any rate, that showed that neurovascular power of that plant. But in addition, it's pretty clear, it stops bleeding, so quickly that you can have the lips of the wound sitting there, nothing's coming out. I mean, it's like, holy cow, it just stopped it, like, you can see right into the wound, And on the other hand, if you have a blood blister or a bruise, it can get rid of them, like, within 45 minutes or so, get the blood out of there. So it has the capacity, there's factors like in the whole, scab forming process where the scab is formed if it's in a vessel, not on the outside of the body, in the vessel, then there's factors that come by to sand that down and smooth it out so that it doesn't catch and cause more scabbing and become, catastrophic scab. And so yarrow undoubtedly has control over both sides of that, both throwing down the scab, stopping the injury, and then sanding it down. Also reabsorbing blood that's left the vessels, I think, if that's possible. I don't know how it does it. I really couldn't say, but it will, when the wound is blue and red, that's good. That means that there's still oxidation and inflammation going on in that, where that bruise is, versus, say, blue and black or blue and yellow, or just pure black. Like an old person may bruise, it just turns black because the oxidation rate is so low. And so yarrow is good when there's still oxidation going on, there's still activity there, and it seems to suck up the blood. I don't know how it does it, through the lymphatics or veins or what's going on there, but it will make that disappear quickly. Plus, so one of my students, he was out cutting wood in Wisconsin, firewood, for 8 hours. He said the moral is never use a chainsaw when you're exhausted. And he cut himself across the shin to the bone, 3 inches long, and you're kind of in shock, and so he kept on working for another 10 minutes, and then he pulled up his pants leg and said, "Yeah, I did cut myself." And then he walked over to the logging road, because yarrow doesn't grow in the woods, and he chewed up yarrow and stuck it on there, and he said the pain stopped almost instantly. And I found that, I've always expected yarrow to be more of a painkiller, but it only works, in my experience, for pain from a laceration. That's it. No other pain did it ever help. Like back pain, I thought this could be good for back pain, nerve sensitivity, no, nothing. He said he took it off after about 10, 12 minutes. He didn't know for sure he was in the woods, but the bleeding had stopped, and he said it looked like the lips of the wound were drawing together, which the old books will say, draws the lips of the wounds together. Modern herbalists won't say that because it's unscientific. But like when bones are broken, they excrete hormones and say, I'm over here, I'm here, I'm here. And I'm pretty sure that wounds do that too. I'm here, like, good, So he came to class the next day, that evening, like a little more than 24 hours later, 25, 26 hours later. And he told the story, and he showed us, and it was just a little brown line on his leg. And he said, this happened yet. When did this happen? Yesterday. We said, we all involuntarily said, you mean the day before yesterday? He said, no, yesterday. Because it had healed so quickly and so well. Boom. And Yarrow will just, it's miraculous, almost healing lacerations. The worse the wound, the better it works. And that means, like, a paper cut, it will not work, but a good cut, also, like it's not for, like a...
Punctures?
Yeah, puncture. Something that doesn't bleed well, it's not well for that. So there's a violent quality to it. And the blood gushes, runs, almost sprays, etc. Things like that, where there's just a lot of bleeding, the better. More of that, it's a soldier remedy. So not only does it cause the scabbing, neurovascular control, but one thing, it's a astringent and a stimulant, and that's the best combination for a wound remedy for bleeding, because astringents deposit the proteins on dilapidated tissues or on tissues, and the proteins stop the bleeding too. Like, that's not what a scab's normal. I mean, there's other factors in making a scab. That's not the right way to make a scab. That's just what happens. If that protein lays down, and that helps. That's the 19th century scientific explanation for why these herbs work. But a lot of them were stimulants too, and stimulants like open the circulation, generally make the blood go to the extremities, and we would think nowadays, oh my God, that's going to make more blood go to the wound. But actually, the blood spreads all over the whole body, and that takes the onus away from that one little wound. So like in the Civil War, on the northern side, when they got wounded and got shot and they were bleeding or something, they give them whiskey as a stimulant. You see this in the writings, give them a stimulant, and you'd go like, God, that's ridiculous. But you see, well, first it's a little bit of it's like, good boy, get some whiskey. Second, it's like anodyne, and third, it stimulates peripheral circulation, and so the blood goes everywhere else. It opens up that peripheral circulation, and the surface of the body, the capillaries can expand 20 times their volume from what it takes to feed the body and the periphery. Boom, they can just explode into being full in order to discharge heat or to redirect the blood away from an injury. So that's what Yarrow has tremendous control over. So number one, it's a great wound remedy. Number two, so closely tied to it, is a good fever remedy, because so you get chilled on the surface, you bring blood back to the surface. Also, you open up sweating. Generally, my experience is Yarrow has an incomplete sweat. It doesn't have, like, no sweat. It's not that they are completely, totally dry with no sweat. It's more like sweat in some places, not in others. But Yarrow might work for you, because you had kind of an intermittent sweating there. And you're a big, strong guy. It's warrior remedy.
I have a friend that was in a car accident. She had a seatbelt on across her lap. The car was totaled. She's got contusions on both legs. Yeah. They're very painful, and she just can't get anything. So would Yarrow be good?
Yeah. That is pretty ideal. If it didn't work, there's quite a few other options too. And but Yarrow is very good at getting rid of old contusions like that, old ecchymosis, like where there's blood, stagnant blood. And I wouldn't have thought it would be such a good one, but it is. Like, so it was kind of the same month. One of my friends put it on. It's like a secretary, I don't know. So she had a lump on her head for 35 years where there'd been a bruise, and he put it on there. I don't know if it was really big or anything, but and it went away in about a month. And about that same time, one of my students had one of these dogs that's so huge that, like, it's kind of terrifying, and it reared up and smacked her right here, and she got a big lump right there. And this went on for a month, and finally, and I was working with her on some herbal projects, and I said, hey, we got to take care of that. You're not allowed to have a bruise like that for a month, So we put Yarrow on, and she was at my house, and we were working on stuff, and it disappeared within an hour. So indeed, it is very good. But
so how would you use it in her case?
yeah, I would. Let's see. Well, Yarrow, it's not the time of year for Yarrow. Do you live around here? Where do you live? Yeah, you can get some from Bonnie, I'm sure. She has.
Still
Do you have Yarrow? Yeah.
Yeah, it's still growing. It's Kind of starting to fade, you know, a bit, but
It blooms like maybe
Use that
June,
sap.
July, and then it fades a little in August, and then it'll come back, and in September there'll be a few flower heads, which I always think are really special because they're the minority, you know, and they want to come at a different time of the year. But so you could put it like something like that, simple and rubbing alcohol again. Make a salve though would be the best, I'd say. But nobody makes a salve on the commercial level. I don't know. Do you have a salve?
do I have a sad gem of Yarrow?
Yeah.
There are some people that have,
Yes, I
yeah,
have.
like
sad.
they make first aid kits and they have a Yarrow salve in it.
Are there companies that make that? Do you know?
I think individual people. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't think companies make it.
Oh,
Yours is?
it's made by you?
Yes,
Oh, is it available at the co-op?
yes.
Oh, okay, well, I'm probably going to get one. 'Cause there's not a good, I haven't seen a commercial company that's making it. But I would get out that. The thing about a salve is the oil keeps it there a long time. Yeah, the oil and the wax.
You have some.
Used it.
You have some.
Except it hasn't worked.
It hasn't
Okay.
been done internally too.
Okay, well, then I would move on to like Angelica, or it depends on the color too. If it's blackish, like sassafras oil is really good. It's blackish. Okay, sassafras oil. Yeah. You're almost going to have to talk to Southern herbalist.
Also, I would say Don Quai.
Okay, Angelica, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Internally, some Don Quai.
Internally?
Oh, because
Yeah.
it's in the female area.
Right.
Yeah. Don Quay.
Don Quai would be just capsules or tinctures. Could really
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, but I definitely do sassafras. How old is she?
About 50.
Yeah, normally as you get older, your blood stagnates a little bit more and more and more, and people in their 50s will tend to get a darker cast to their bruise, and then by the time they're in their 70s, 80s, they get these black. So there's this slow aging whereas kids and people in their 20s have this, it's red and blue, it's nothing to worry about.
Yellow, green, goes for all the colors.
Yeah, yellow green is more the Angelica color too. Yeah. So okay. Well, actually, the good news is you already tried Yarrow and it didn't work, so therefore we know to go on to other things. Yeah.
But there again, too, I'd ask her how often. In that area, you're not going to put it on that often because it's going to rub off on clothes if you don't cover it up with gauze or something like that, too.
Well, also, as women age, and she's 50, so going through menopause or perimenopause, there's a huge change to the structure of the blood vessel because blood vessels themselves have estrogen receptor sites in them, which keep them taut and active and toned. So as a woman goes through menopause, the vessels begin to lose their tone and get lax. And it makes it much harder, easier for seepage because the vessel is lax and more porous. And
Good, continue.
yeah, but it also makes the bruises longer to go away and they get darker when they happen. And the veins showing through the skin look darker too because of this laxity. This is why you see older women with these giant blood vessels. It's like there's no tone there. So the Don Quai provides some phytoestrogenic activity, which provides toning to the vessels. And plus, it's a blood mover and it's a blood thinner. And so for women, I think Don Quai, especially anything as
Well,
young
older
as-
women.
Older
because-
women is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because Yarrow is actually kind of anti-estrogenic, so it actually, you can see why it wouldn't work here.
Yeah, so then that provides that phytoestrogenic activity, blood toning of the vessels, and it clears it up really quick.
This is interesting, yeah, because we'll get onto these. Yarrow is a good anti-hemorrhagic for menstrual bleeding, but it's when you have high estrogen. And
Right,
not
it's like,
low.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So this shows the importance of differential diagnosis, even with bruise remedies of all things, So, okay, then just the other thing is a really good massage therapist who can just work it out with their fingers too, because sometimes you can feel the bruises and get in there and actually, work
Break 'em
and,
up.
and break them up with your fingers, kind of. So I don't want to give herbs as the only possibility, but.
He's a massage therapist.
Oh, you're a massage therapist? Okay.
A really good one.
Well, that's a heavy-duty lymphatic area in women. The upper thighs are, there's a lot of them right here and right here in women. So it's a very, very tender area to work. It's very sensitive.
Yeah, and unfortunately, being injured like that, she'll exercise the area less, and then it gets less tone. So, okay, so bruises, blood blisters, wounds, fevers, and then we'll mention D-grade fever formula, which Rosemary is always touting, our friend Rosemary, which is, to me, it's almost the most Rosemary-ish formula of all, even though it's from Juliet and ancient European herbal tradition. That's yarrow, elder, and peppermint. Or yarrow flowers, elder flowers, and peppermint leaves.
It's like ancient remedy, European
Yeah.
remedy.
What was the last?
For what?
Well, peppermint
Peppermint.
leaves, yeah. Or spearmint or watermint if you don't have peppermint. But,
And what was that? I'm sorry, what was that used for?
that's your basic all-around fever remedy.
Oh, yeah.
Like in a herbal home remedy kit, you'd have that. Well, many people would have elder, but elder, yarrow, and peppermint really work together. So it's kind of like if you had your homeopathic home remedy kit, that would like cover aconite, belladonna, bone set, a bunch of your, or not gelsemium, but a bunch of your basic fever remedies. So yeah, so that's a really primal fever remedy, but yarrow by itself too. So, okay, so that's use 1 and 2, and then use 3. It's an astringent that's okay. It's a stimulant, but the funny thing about it is it's a cooling stimulant. There's only a few herbs like this, like echinacea, lavender, the only other cooling stimulants I can think of right off the bat. And that's because they clear blood out of the capillaries. When you clear blood out of the capillaries, you cool things off. And it does it mostly by, yarrow clearly helps by opening up the venous circulation, astringing, and so it is for varicose veins, hemorrhoids, etc. Bleeding hemorrhoids in particular. Yellow dock is also for bleeding hemorrhoids. But yarrow is good there.
Diverticulosis.
What's that?
Diverticulosis.
Yes.
I gave it to my wife last week.
Yeah.
She was starting to bleed, so I gave her some of that and
Boom. Yeah.
done. Yeah.
Did you learn that from Matt House?
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, you learned it from me, probably.
and probably.
And I learned it from William Sausage.
Yeah.
No, I was teaching it, and I could tell William was in the audience. It was like psychic. I knew, oh, William knows about that too. And I had not been introduced to him. So, so it's there's William. But, that was our psychic introduction. Yeah, veins that need toning. Okay, and so a constitutional symptom that these people are very characteristic is that you look at the blue veins with red in the tissue all around it, or the varicose veins look like that. What that means is turgid veins with backup into the capillaries. Because lots of varicose vein remedies, there is no redness in there. It's just all dark and mottled and like, ugh, you know. So, and this also, you begin to see how it fits younger people perhaps, and more active as a wounded warrior again, you know. Okay, so number 4, it's an astringent stimulant to the digestive tract. I'm not too good at using it here, but bleeding from the stomach, occasionally colitis, enteritis, stuff like that, with the bleeding hemorrhoids, etc. It's definitely not my favorite remedy for that, but I may be missing something. But it has been used for people, the diverticulitis, yeah, and diverticulosis both, because it's a astringent that gets rid of the diverticulosis. But diverticulitis, I had one good case where it cured that, which is pretty amazing, because that's like surgery, you know. Yeah, and where the diverticulosis gets inflamed. And talk about psychic again. This is my friend Chris's husband, and she said, as they were leaving the clinic, she heard in her mind the doctor say, "Does he have insurance?" Which he did, because he was a stonemason. He kind of had to have insurance. But we saved his colon. Okay, so that's use number 3, 4, then female. So it's good for excessive bleeding. So now, even if it has some, like, apparently it increases progesterone and decreases estrogen, I've never seen real clear data on that, but kind of suggestions towards that. I don't know if anybody knows more about that. It has enough hormonal monkey business to it that in Williams said in Taos in New Mexico, the Spanish of New Mexico, and the Indians used it as birth control. So it altered the hormones in some way enough to cut down a pregnancy.
I know the midwives down in Mexico use that
Oh.
Yarrow a lot.
Oh, well, they probably use it postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would not want to be a midwife in a third world condition or even America without Yarrow and shepherd's purse on hand for postpartum hemorrhage. It's so, yeah, because this would be like you burst a big blood vessel. It's like, oh, there you got your wounded warrior. You just delivered a baby. That's pretty. And whereas oozing and like sub-involution of the uterus won't go back into place. That's more shepherd's purse. So oozing, dark clot, and shepherd's purse, the hemorrhagic. This is for hemorrhagic bleeding. So you just think of someone who's like full-blooded. When their endometrium, they build their endometrium once a month. It's like engorged with blood. Then they slough that, and there's lots of bleeding, as that tears away, bleed. And so you get bright red hemorrhagic exhaustive bleeding. Also, this is good for fibroids with bleeding, specific to fibroids in the womb, in the interior of the womb, rather than myomas, which are in the wall of the womb. That shepherd's purse is better for that. This one's better for bleeding from the ones in the interior there. Okay. So that's use number 5.
And for women with menses, if they start taking, like for my wife, the first day or two is really heavy bleeding. I'm wondering if she can take Yarrow a couple of days before that to maybe cut back on it with that, or is it just something that's got to run its course?
No, if she's got bright red bleeding, yeah. If she's similar to you in age or a little bit younger, she's probably already getting to the point where Yarrow may no longer be as appropriate. But if you've got bright red bleeding and copious, then Yarrow is more indicated, especially with that blue reddish complexion. So, and a robust personality, So, yeah. Or you can try it certainly and see, but then try it in small doses.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Like 3 to 5 drops a couple times.
Yeah, I've used that, but also externally for wounds and also, I mean, because it's a first aid thing, people have chewed it up, put it on all sorts of different ways of using it. So, and of course, saliva is medicinal. Yeah, you can't get the dog to lick your wound.
But like for the example, for women with bright red circulating flow, small doses a few times a day.
I just make a T-ball.
Okay. Like this plant
she puts
works
other stuff
fresh
on
or
it.
dried. And,
Cinnamon or whatever.
It's probably almost impossible to destroy the virtues of this plant. But definitely if they have fibroids, I use bigger doses again. We were talking about this whole dosage thing. Partly I learned it from Maria Trebin, who suggested sitz baths, so that's up to the waist, not up to the heart, up to somewhere around here, sitting in the bathtub. So I would take something like, instead of a T-ball, probably put a handful of fresh or dried Yarrow in the teapot and or pour hot water over it, steep it, and then just pour it directly from the teapot or strain it still, definitely. I mean, you don't have to strain it, but if you want a whole bunch of herbs floating around in your bathtub clogging up your drain, you can do that too. But at any rate, sitz bath with like a good clump of it. So this is a method that's particularly good for summertime use, and that is the way to get rid of the fibroids is to sitz bath. And either get rid of the fibroids or cut down on the bleeding a lot. So, but if it's dark, oozing, coagulated, and it's more myomas, then I go to the shepherd's purse. I would like to have a few more anti-hemorrhagic remedies here, but those are the 2 great ones I know. And a third one will come up with the sumac is for watery blood or serum mixed with blood. but even then I'd like 2 or 3 more before I feel comfortable, but that's all I know after all these years. So, you can teach a few more?
Yeah.
Okay. And that gets pretty much to the end of most of the physical stuff for Yarrow, but then mentally it's for the wounded warrior, wounded healer, people that, so firemen, nurses, doctors, jump in, put out the fires, get cut to the bone. That reminds me, yeah. And then also the wounded healers, more sensitive, delicate, more easily injured or feeling, they don't need to jump in to put out the fire. They're just sitting at home helping somebody. And it's like, okay, that's a terrible story. So it's that cut to the bone, deeply hurt in some way. So it has a mental use very similar. Okay, and then it's used by the flower essence people. We say use number 7 or 8 here for psychic protection. That makes sense. Like kind of against, that violent, nasty, bad things out there. And finally, strangely, this remedy actually does protect you against sharp edges and wounds and injuries and working with blades and stuff. And my friend Chris, whose husband was a stonemason, she was a bartender and she worked with she just got to know a lot of people who were tradesmen and women and who worked with machines and things. And first she'd help them with Yarrow, but they did find she really had enough people that you could verify this, that if you hung up a sprig of Yarrow around the workshop, it would protect you. You were more attentive to your work situation and to blades and things. And she said it would work for about 6 months, and then you had to hang up a fresh sprig. And so I've used this. I've never gotten feedback, but every once in a while, over 30 years, this has probably happened half a dozen times, where it's usually a mom says, "God, I'm so nervous when my daughter drives so badly." This is like a 20, 30-year-old daughter, It's like, I'm so nervous for her. And I said, well, let's hang up Yarrow in her car. Maybe it'll help her drive better. But I've never gotten feedback on that. But I'd rather do it than not do it. So, yeah.
Would you recommend using younger leaves?
Okay. Use the flower tops. Top 3 to 6 inches. When it's in bloom, that's my favorite. If you can't get that, you can get the Indians call it squirrel tails when they're just coming out. That's okay. And both the Dakota and the Greeks, Homer, use the root, powdered up, sprinkled. But I just stuck with the flower tops. So and the flower tops are pretty darn nice with the smell and everything. Still, they have the bitter. They are not sweet. They're bitter. They're astringent. They have a little bit of volatile oils. They're stimulating. Yeah. What?
They get a little bite to them.
Yeah. That plant is boom. It can cause nosebleed. It is for nosebleed, like treats like. And let's see. One more. Oh, and it's used the Indians used it to revive from coma, which again has increasing consciousness, and what you said for using it for your granddaughter that fell out the window, even to revive, from being a little bit, shocked. If someone's in a car accident and they're shocked, I would rather have arnica. Arnica is that's one major difference. Yarrow is for pain, but it's not so much for shock the way arnica is. So.
But I used it because I knew she fell in the spine, so I didn't want
my God, yes.
coagulation going to that spinal cord.
Yes, that's one final use number 9 or 10. Really, really important. Anybody who's had a brain injury or spinal injury, surgery, in those first couple days, if you can get Yarrow, and I've had to have people bring, just go into the room of the post-op person and spray Yarrow around. Our friend Clara, who had a brain tumor the size of an apple, and they removed that. And my friend Martha, I said, go down and bring a spray bottle of Yarrow and just say, she's an Indian, we're Indians. This is part of our ceremony. And she did fine. She lost a little short-term memory, a little memory of nouns for some reason, but names. But I would always do that for spinal and head injuries, because it helps the blood move, and so much of the injury comes from the blood cutting off the nerves and things like that. And I would say if surgeons knew about this, boy, could they do better. They would kiss a herbalist for that one. Not me personally, but they would really like to know about it. They are using Yarrow arnica a little bit, but I even like Yarrow even better. So that's my take on Yarrow. I'm sorry. Okay, so years ago at the store when we were first learning about it, this young kid worked there, Victor. He was more of a worker than an herbalist. And he came in one day and he said, "Yeah, I had this dream about Yarrow. It said, Yarrow is for cuts to the bone and cuts to the third level of the blood." And we said, "What does that mean?" He says, "I don't know." And a month later, he cut himself to the bone, and he put gold seal on it, but that didn't work, so they put Yarrow on it, and that worked. And I told this story for a couple of years, and then another herbalist in Halsey Brand, Arizona, said, "Oh, I know what that means. The first level of the blood is the arteries, the second is the arterioles, and the third is the capillaries." That really makes sense. So it cuts to the arteries. That makes sense, the third level of blood. Or maybe I reversed that. Yeah. So that's my story. All right.
Okay. I was going to say for your friend, if the dog quite didn't work, you might try the right coach. Probably do it. I've got my grandmother. Yarrow doesn't grow where I live, but my grandmother did raise some, and it was she had very little, and she called it Millie. Because the leaves are 1 million leaves. That's where that came from. So.
Wow.
Sorry.
Rock it out.
I forgot to turn that on.
So, and you dropped something on the floor there too.
Oh, yeah.
So I did have a very cursory awareness of the plant, and a couple of times my great aunt raised it, and I would get cuttings and I would put in my yard, sort of thing. But I never really used it very often because I've never had a lot to use. And two yard stories. So I was in Minneapolis. I was the featured speaker at the North Country Herbalist Guild weekend, and I was staying at a lady's house overnight for a couple of nights to go be the speaker at this gathering. And as we were leaving the first day to go to the symposium, she had a rug at the top of her steps, and it had overlapped the step, and I didn't realize it, and I slipped at the top of the steps, and I landed on, you remember this? Because I had just said to Matthew 2 days before, well, I don't really know about Yarrow. I don't really so it's not something I was familiar with. So anyway, I ended up on my way down to the bottom, it was like 20 feet. I ended up bouncing on my head, on my butt, down my spine. My leg got caught in the banister, twisted me around. I ended up going down backwards, head first, bouncing down the steps. And I get to the bottom of the steps, and I'm laying there. And immediately have an contusion right here. I mean, it's like gigantic. Not a contusion, well, huge. What are those called? Hematoma. Had a hematoma come up on my arm. Back of my head is swollen. I got a big swollen spot coming up right here already on my head. My spine feels like I've been run over by a Mack truck. My leg that got caught in the banister tore. So, I could feel all the ligaments and tendons there in my groin. They were not happy. It was my right leg. My shoulder was pretty much out of joint where I'd landed. I was like in a wreck. I was totally not in a good place. I mean, it was a major injury, falling down steps. So when I got to the bottom, Kathy came rushing over, and then her partner came over, and her partner started asking me questions about her own health. And I'm like this. And she is going, because she was going through breast cancer, and she was asking me all these questions about breast cancer and her diet, and I'm like looking up at her, and I'm like not even what's coming out. There's something being lost between her mouth and my brain. and so Kathy was like, well, we got to go. Maybe you can answer her questions later. And so we've got to get there. And so I wobble into the conference, and I, get up in front of the podium, and I look out, and there's like 6 of everybody. And, I realize I'm in trouble. I'm in bad shape. And I'm standing there, and I'm really wobbling. I've got double vision. And I say, I can't talk, to the group. And I don't know, maybe there's 100 people there?
Yeah, oh, this is a big one.
It was a big one, about maybe 100 people. And I'm like, I was like, what am I going to do? I couldn't talk. I was like, I was in bad shape. This was a bad accident. And so I'm standing there, and I just said, all right, what do I do, God? And so I said,